Hey friends, Dean here with some exciting news to share. You can now buy us a coffee. That's right. You can help support independent content creators like us by becoming a member of the 3324 Green Room at buymeacoffee.com/3324. Our episodes will always be free and that will not change, but your support at buymeacoffee.com/3324 will help us continue to bring you the best in music and movie podcasting, in our humble opinion. As a Green Room supporter, you'll not only have our undying gratitude, but you'll also be able to vote on which episodes we record and receive other perks for as low as $3 per month. That's the price of a cup of coffee. There's absolutely no obligation, and nothing about the show will change. It's not going behind a paywall. Go to buymeacoffee.com/3324 for all the details. The link will be in the show notes of every episode as well. We'll see you in the Green Room. This episode is about a concert film that's also an album that was directed by a soon-to-be Oscar winner. What I'm trying to say would be a lot easier to get across if I stopped making sense. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast, home of the clever intros. Besides all the good stuff we do.
Stifling a laugh. That was brilliant. Very clever.
That was good.
Very clever.
You know, I got to I got to pay my writer now. So anything that gets a laugh, I have to pay the writer. So just don't, even if you like it, don't laugh. Don't just make like you don't. This way I have to pay the writer. Yeah. But if it's your first time here, you can go back and listen to every episode. Has a witty intro, some more wittier than others. We'll leave it to you to decide which ones are the wittiest. But every episode comes out on Thursday. So if this is your first time, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. We hope you enjoy this episode about Stop Making Sense by the Talking Heads. There is tons of other stuff in the back room. You don't have to check with us. You could just walk in there and just see what you like and check it out. And by all means, and if you like that, then share it with your friends. If you have like-minded friends that like music and movies and like to hear people discuss it and give their takes on it, that's what we're here for. This is what we love to do, Eric.
That's right. That's right. We loved it. We love it. And we love it. We love it dearly. And yeah, we were just commenting, just commenting on our Blood on the Tracks episode and how that just came out today. We dropped that today, and lots of fun. Kudos to our current guest and to the special guest on that episode, which was his father. And we thank him a great deal for having you both on. That was a really fun episode. And and we were just commenting on how great your dad was on that one. So,
well, thank you. He had a lot of fun. He definitely enjoyed himself, and I enjoyed having that conversation because I normally don't get the opportunity to talk that much about Dylan with people. So it was cool.
The 3324 podcast, bringing families together.
That's right.
We're like the Folgers coffee of podcasts.
See that? We're expanding.
In the morning when you wake up and you smell the coffee and the family members waiting there, and then you look and you bond. That's what this podcast is. If you didn't know who that was, that is Mr. Yeah,
waiting for the pot to be done.
Exactly.
Wait for everybody to wake up.
To be released.
There you go. Yeah.
We've got Mr. Christopher Clark with us. If you didn't know who that was, so welcome aboard, Chris. Glad to have you with us for another episode.
Good to be back as always.
Yeah, we've been circling this one for a while, Eric and I, and then kind of let it flounder because other things kind of. I'm like that, I'm like that dog when like the butterfly goes by. Oh, shiny object, and then I get distracted, and then it takes someone else, and in this case, Chris, to put it on a list of recommendations he had. And it's like, oh shit. Stop Making Sense. Let's do that one. So let's get to the stats, and we'll start the conversation. This film, so actually we're doing a hybrid episode, right, Eric? This is a film and it's a soundtrack. So it can be consumed both ways. And I think successfully, either way, because I was listening to it on Spotify earlier today, just as a musical experience, and it works just as well.
Yeah, it's one of those rare occurrences where we could talk about both and honor both, and
and some concert films are better seen. Like The Last Waltz, I think, is better seen because it's got the interviews and there's a lot of other things going on. Not to say that this shouldn't be seen, but this works as well. Anyway, this was released in April of 1984, directed by Jonathan Demme, the late Jonathan Demme. The budget was a meager $1.2 million, and the original box office take, because there has been a re-release, and Eric and I saw it in midnight shows, which probably was not part of that box office, but the original box office take was $5.3 million. Now, Eric, we did see this at a midnight show.
Was it a midnight show?
It was, I believe it was. I don't think it was the original theatrical release. I don't think it was 84 when we saw it. I think when it was making the midnight show circuit, I think that's when we saw it. If you want to search your memory banks.
I don't know, because I distinctly remember that you and I and our mutual friend John went to see it together.
Walter, I saw it more than once.
And you might have seen it at a midnight show, because I remember seeing it. It was in the evening, but it wasn't midnight. And I just because the reason for that is because when we were done, the first thing we did was go to Crazy Eddie, and I bought the soundtrack right on the spot.
Okay. So I should have worn my Crazy Eddie t-shirt. I should have worn my Crazy Eddie
t-shirt. Insane.
So that was the memory for me, and I had only seen it the one time in the theater. So
got it.
Yeah. Okay. So you might have seen it perhaps a little bit later.
No,
on,
I can stand corrected. I was trying to pinpoint what, because when I saw that it came out in 84, I'm like, I don't remember 80. I don't remember it seeing it in 84, but I could be wrong. Chris, what is your connection or what was your first encounter with Stop Making Sense?
So my old man, when my mom would go out at night, that would be his time to crank up the music, and from the other room he would listen to the whole record, but the song he would kind of listen to over and over again was Life During Wartime. And so that was the first thing I remember hearing from this record, was that version of Life During Wartime. And then as I got older, it was one of those records I went to go back and check out as I started getting into as I became a teenager, I got into punk music and a lot of the modern punk, but I was always the kind of guy that would go, okay, well, what did the people I listened to, what did they listen to? And I got into the Ramones and the CBGB stuff, and that's how I came to Stop Making Sense. But my first encounter with it was always the album and not the visual. I came at it from the music first, and then I didn't really see the visual until I was an adult, and it was on streaming services. I remember watching it on Amazon before they took it off Amazon to do the A24 recut of it. So for me, it was always about the music first and then the visual second. But now that I've seen the visual, it's two different experiences, but they're both equally enriching and rewarding. And it's not one of those concert movies where you're bored, you're engaged the entire time. I think it's a really brilliant thing, and it kind of shows you what I always thought was brilliant about the movies. It shows you the personalities of the players and truly how much they loved what they were doing. I always was very surprised when I read Chris Franz's book a couple of years ago, and he spends, I don't know if either of you have read it, but he spends the entire book ripping David Byrne to shreds, and he talks about what a bastard David Byrne was during this tour and how he made everybody miserable. But when I watched the movie, they have looks on their faces when they're playing that reminds me of when I would be in a garage with my friends, banging out Nirvana covers and just having fun. It seems like they're genuinely, everybody on that stage is filled with joy, and it makes you appreciate that music even more than when I first heard the record. So
yeah, and some of that might be revisionist history or
that was my take on it too. Yeah.
I didn't realize how miserable I was at the time, but looking back, that kind of stuff. When you've got distance in the rearview mirror. Tina Weymouth, the same thing, and Chris Frantz and Tina Weymouth are married, so she also has taken her fair share of shots at him. Also, just to get everybody caught up, Talking Heads are a new wave post-punk band, kind of known as a New York City band. They were formed in 1975, and you've got David Byrne, Jerry Harrison, Tina Weymouth, and Chris Frantz. That is Talking Heads. When you look at if you watch the films stop making sense, you'll see they're enhanced greatly and to great effect with a diverse set of musicians helping them out. You got Bernie Worrell,
Alex Weir on guitar, Edna Holt
Yes.
and Lynn Mabry on backing vocals,
you.
and Steve Scales.
Steve
percussion.
Scales.
Steve
Steve
Scales
Scales.
is like, to me, he's like the secret weapon of that whole performance, man. He's amazing.
No
They
doubt.
really kind of deliver this. Like I said, either way, if you're going to listen to it or watch the film. Eric and I approached it from watching the film, and I don't recall being a big Talking Heads fan. I don't even remember why we went to to be honest, like, not in a
that's
bad
because
way,
we
but
just
I don't
saw
remember why
anything
we
that
went.
came our way.
Yeah.
The 80s was like that for us. I mean, we just went to see whatever was out, and music was we were coming into music at the same time, and of course, I had always liked the videos that they did on MTV. This was it Speaking in Tongues had been out for a year. So Burning Down the House was burning up MTV. And of course, Once in a Lifetime, they would show, Remain in Light was a great record. I didn't particularly know them that well, but this was probably perhaps the fastest I ever got into a band just by watching this film, because it was just so great. I felt like I had gone to the show.
Yeah.
And
you definitely get that vibe.
Experience. And like Chris was saying, it just the joy and the fun, and every song is catchy, and there's not one song where you're kind of just like, okay, I wish this one was over. No, you're digging it the whole time. And I was I was really looking forward to seeing it again when A24 released it. I never got a chance to see it, especially in IMAX. I was dying to go, could never get my schedule straight. And by the time the theater, like, that was maybe 20 minutes away, is the only theater that had it. It was gone by the time I was available. But thanks to the good folks of A24, they released it on, home media. So there it is, the A24 remaster, the film. I got the T-shirt on. So yeah, and when I watched it again, I watched it with my youngest son, and boy, he went from going like this to this by the end of it. He was digging it. So it was a lot of fun.
You make some excellent points there for us that weren't into Talking Heads and decidedly not probably in our arena of what we were listening to at the time.
Yeah.
Each song had some type of hook to it, something to grab you in, the world music aspect of the stuff, the quirkiness of David Byrne, of just watching him perform on stage. The tightness of the band. There are so many different things that you can hook onto in the film experience, and it carries over into the audio experience. But watching the film, you really see and how they did it was brilliant. We'll get to that. I don't want to get ahead, but this was one of the earliest uses of digital recording techniques, and you can hear it.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it sounds fantastic, especially watching it. It sounds incredible. This was shot over 4 nights in Hollywood at the Pantages Theater. One night was specifically filmed only from the sides of the stages, just to get, Jonathan Demme approached it with a really measured approach to it. He wanted to make sure he got what he got and didn't miss anything. So by doing it over 4 nights, he can just one night film it from the sides, get all the coverage. They wanted to limit audience reactions and stuff like that, because then you'd have to light the audience, and they didn't want to distract from that. Every member was supposed to be wearing muted colors. If you're wondering why they're all wearing grays and muted shades, because it would just be easier to light. They didn't want any weird colors.
Yeah.
Chris Franz, if you notice, though, in the beginning of the show, he's wearing a blue polo.
Yeah.
Because his laundry wasn't ready yet. He did not have, his thing wasn't, the laundry wasn't ready. So he wears a blue polo in the beginning, but then you'll see that when they cut to later shows, it's actually kind of more of a muted gray polo.
Yes.
So what I had heard is, I didn't hear the laundry thing. I heard it was more of like a fuck you to David Byrne, because he also in his book talks about how David Byrne's muted colors were just a little less muted than everybody else's to kind of make him pop. Which, watching the movie, I don't see that really at all. I feel like David Byrne is pretty much just as muted as everybody else. But that green shirt was more of like go fuck yourself. I'm going to stand out just as much as you are. I mean, I don't know if that's really true or if it's just Chris Franz, again, being a revisionist about his history of the band.
Exactly. Yeah, you kind of have to take those things, again, when someone's angry at someone else, it's very easy to kind of take things and tweak them and adjust them to fit an agenda or a feeling.
Well, David Byrne, I mean, he pretty much approached this whole thing with something in mind, some sort of a concept, or this was not just a concert. They weren't just, he had a definite sort of point of view and a vision in mind, and collaborating with a film director and getting the great Jordan Cronenweth to shoot it. Among other things, he shot Blade Runner, which of course for me was a win-win.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So the lighting, that's where, I mean, he's a master at that kind of stuff. So and especially now seeing it, the remaster is just phenomenal. It just looks so good.
Yeah. There are guys literally walking around the stage. You see them with lights and basically putting spotlights underneath people to get, effective shots and to really kind of get moods out of what they're doing. So it's not just the stage lighting that they have. They actually have people, and you see them in the film walking around with lights, and they're kind of pointing them and trying to get interesting lighting schemes, to film, which is very. This wasn't just, hey, let's set up the camera and let it roll, kind of thing, which is great. You can get, concert films, you can get that. The interesting thing about this, go ahead, Chris, before I get into it.
No, I was going to say it's almost like it's telling the story without cutting away from the actual movie, just the way the sequence, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, and the fact that they're letting you see like the stage hands and all that stuff. It's telling the story of the concert without like actually going into like a second narrative like you would see in like the movie that the band Ghost just put out, or like when Metallica did that Ridiculous Through the Never. It's the story of the show, and you actually are getting a narrative without cutting away from an actual concert.
Yeah, and you teed it up perfectly. The film starts. The way they do this is very interesting because it's you're literally seeing the bare stage. You're seeing the whole stage without the backdrop. So you see the ladder in the back, and it almost looks like a warehouse. And David Byrne comes out by himself with a radio and says, I want to play this tape for you, and starts off with Psycho Killer. And as that song is ending, as he's kind of convulsing around like he does, stagehands start rolling pieces out. Right, they start rolling out Tina Weymouth's kind of setup, and then Tina comes out and they do a song they do Heaven with just the two of them. With some backing vocalists, right? And then as that song's winding down, the stage hands, they wheel out another piece, and Jerry Harrison comes out. No, I'm sorry, Chris Franz comes out second.
Yeah.
So then they do a 3-piece song, and then they wheel out Jerry Harrison stuff, and then you've got all the talking heads. Now that's very interesting because other bands, we've seen other bands do that, but usually everything is set up. Like the drum kit, the riser, everything's there. They're just not on the stage. This was very interesting because dynamically, while one song is winding down, people are bringing out the next piece, and it's ready to go. There's no tuning, there's no sound checking. It's kind of like almost like a stage performance, right? Yeah, where here comes the next piece of the set, and then by the end, they drop the curtain behind them, and you've got the whole band assembled, and here's everything. So it's a really interesting. Cinematic way to set everything up, and it makes it very interesting because all of a sudden, like, there's people walking out on the stage and they're rolling the thing out to the mark, and then they're walking away, and then the next person comes in.
I think that was the thing that grabbed us the first time we saw it, because like you pointed out, you're just expecting to see the audience, probably filing into the arena, and people getting their seats, and they always show
standard shots.
Yeah, they always show footage of people standing in line or something. There was none of that. There was just it was so brilliant the way it was set up. And I wonder if the band, maybe that where some of the problems came in, where they didn't want to be perhaps maneuvered that way or something. But this is all a concept that Byrne had, from the get-go. And maybe they just wanted to play. Who knows? I don't know. I'm interested in reading that book, Chris. I'd like to.
Yeah, I mean,
check out what
he's got an agenda. I will say that. Like, it was kind of cool to hear how they started at the Rhode Island School of Design and how they made their way down to New York. you can definitely see he's a little pissed off. I guess the way he didn't want to let Tina into the band right away. How he was a miserable POS during their tour with the Ramones and in Europe and all that kind of stuff. And he just every event in the history of the band, he talks about how brilliant the band is, but then has something that pisses him off about David Byrne. So,
well,
I mean, Eric? Isn't that the way it is though with like these,
of course, these eccentric,
quote unquote, genius leaders?
Yeah.
Or, there's always some eccentricity. David Byrne has said himself that this has not been confirmed, but he thinks that he is on the autism spectrum in one form or another, but he's never been tested or confirmed. And he says that's kind of what kind of makes up who I am and how I react to things.
Yeah. Well, even today you see him, I think he's a lot, the older he is, the experience that he's had, but, he seems a lot more relaxed today. Perhaps maybe had a lot of therapy or who knows what, whatever chemicals he needed to, but I mean, he seems to be, but I always remember seeing interviews after the fact, like, going back and watching old footage of the Talking Heads and seeing him. Yeah. He was very, very quiet, very sort of, never looking at the person when he talked. It was just, you could definitely tell that there was something very odd about the guy and just, just in his mannerisms and his body language. But then again, so, Tina Weymouth was
she's eccentric too.
Kind of, yeah, on that wavelength as well. Cause she's very, very timid and very, and again, like just that whole,
I think they all are. I think they're all unique individuals. I think, and that's what makes.
Well, and they come across as very intellectual as well.
Yeah.
To hear them talk and so yeah, perhaps maybe that's the chemistry, that is, what they're all about, that there's that commonality there. But yeah, having one person sort of dictate after a while, and the consensus is that you're just not, maybe you're going a little too far. Who knows? But it does occur a lot, so, but anyway.
But what's interesting is if you look at the writing credits on the songs for Stop Making Sense or any Talking Heads records, it's not like he's got the sole writing credit the whole way down. And on this record, I think it's mostly band compositions, right? So it's, I mean, that conflict and that give and take, he is actually sharing the credit for the writing, which I always found interesting because if you look at it on the surface, you would think David Byrne was like a Pete Townsend where he's like writing the music and giving it to the band to play.
Yeah. You would think that it's kind of the David Byrne band, right?
Exactly.
With supporting players, or eventually one person will rise, and it's usually the person that is the lead. Kind of we've seen it happen. It kind of happens naturally. Chris, who do you think is having more fun, Tina Weymouth or Jerry Harrison in this film?
I feel like Tina Weymouth is.
There is so much exuberance on this stage from the backing singers, from the percut. Like everybody's having a grand time, but Tina Weymouth, in her understated way, is always smiling. She's kind of always looking around, and she always has a smile on her face. And Jerry Harrison is just like all over the place.
Yeah, Jerry Harrison always looks kind of stern, but he definitely looks like he's having fun. He's like hamming it up with the backup singers. I forget on which song it was I was watching this afternoon. And then Tina Weymouth is definitely like she's constantly smiling and looking at her husband, who, I mean, Chris Franz looked like he's having a ball too. I mean, they just, like I said, everywhere you look, like they looked like they reminded me of like me and my buddies when we would like, play in a garage and just like bang out covers and having fun playing covers like that. It had that youthful like joy that you get when you first start playing music as a kid. Like that's what it reminded me of watching it.
Yeah. Eric, where does Chris Franz fall for you? When I was rewatching it, I was getting a little Stuart Copeland vibe, just the way he was attacking the drum, like hitting those crashes really fast, really kind of going after it. It reminded me of how Stuart Copeland kind of attacks the kit.
He's a very Chris Franz is a very, very tight drummer, very tight in his playing, and it's just but fluid. And I was always impressed with him. And watching this again, I'm like, damn. Yeah. I forgot how great of a drummer he actually was.
But he's dressed like the guy at the barbecue.
Yeah. Like, just a very normal, like average, but that's cool, man. I mean, these guys are not looking to be glamorous in any way. And although, I have to say, when I first saw the film, I couldn't take my eyes off of Tina Weymouth. She just, that eccentricity that and so light on her feet. She's doing these, like, she's stepping on her toes, and these guys are solid musicians, and that must have been tough for her to be doing, those, the constantly, tippy toeing on the feet, and just keeping that bass line going, and just, man, how sometimes, you're in motion and things could easily just, you might hit a sour note, or you're, you could slip up or something, but it just, everything's flawless,
Eric, does this predate Peter Gabriel? Because I was getting the Peter Gabriel concert vibes from this, with all the motion,
absolutely,
the kinetic energy, the jumping, kind of Gabriel. Was he doing it at this point in '84, or was it not until later when he really embraced the world, kind of the world sound, and
I think when he started integrating world musicians into his act,
so definitely
he was still doing the sort of the theatrics with the makeup. I think at this point, painting his face and all that kind of thing. But by the time of So, definitely that's why I think I like so much in that sense, because it might have reminded me of Stop Making Sense, and the sort of integration, even with Paul Simon when he was when he did the Graceland tour. Having all of these wonderful musicians from all these different countries in the band, and just integrating that and the diversity of it, and decidedly having these players in this show, changed the nature of some of the tunes. Some of them used to be very sort of stoic and, eccentric, and more sort of electronic, Brian Eno-ish, and kind of very, remain in light kind of things, not clunky, but on the other hand, certainly not funky, like if they were, performed in this thing, you know what I mean? So it's just, it just opened up these songs just breathe new air, and it's just such a joy. Yeah.
Like even Take Me to the River, like that song, when they did their version of it, it was so far afield from the way Al Green did it. It had that, like, they turned a R&B song into like a new wave song, and then they kind of, on this record, you brought the R&B back with the background singers and all the
absolutely, all
the extra musicians and stuff. Yeah,
great.
I think it totally enhanced the sound of it. Again, this is just a beautiful sounding recording. Mm-hmm. David Byrne's acoustic guitar on Psycho Killer, it's so clear and crisp.
Yeah,
right. You hear like every strum like clearly. So this really benefited. I don't know exactly what early digital technology they were using, but whatever it was it was absolutely amazing, because back in '84, that kind of stuff, you could suffer at the hands of a poor of a poor live recording. There have been plenty of those back then. So the fact that they were able to capture this, and it just sounds so crystal clear and sharp. And beautiful, and all the layers are there, all the stuff that Bernie Worrell is doing, all the like all the weird stuff, and then, like I said, you've got Steve Scales just kind of going off on his percussion and the backing vocals.
I love
it's so much ear candy.
I love it.
There's
I love
so much going on, especially on Burning Down the House.
Yeah,
how they almost recreated like the studio version by getting the tom drums, those kind of fills in there drums, while Chris Franz is playing.
Yep.
It's great stuff. Like I hadn't seen this since probably we saw it, maybe aside from a clip here or there. So just to revisit it was almost like watching it anew. Or watching it with newer eyes, because I was so much more appreciative of the art that was going into it, I being turned on by the quirkiness of it.
You said it. I felt the same way, and I'm just so regret not seeing it, because when they were showing it in theaters, I was watching YouTube clips of people dancing in the aisles with this thing. Man, they must have had to turn the house lights up a bit just so people weren't falling over their chairs. But it was so great to see something like this come back and just bring that back to people. And even like I said, like my son getting into it, new fans, new people reacting, who were never Talking Heads fans. They never even heard of the band, watching this thing and reacting to it. It's just because it's just so well done. It's just
Yeah.
and I really appreciated the film aspect of it, probably even more so than the concert. Because, I don't know if you guys noticed, but the soundtrack, there are a few tracks where it's actually not the same performance. That they were
you could tell that. Yeah, you could tell that
very careful.
They're using a good audio take.
Yeah,
and
in the film too,
take.
because there are times I think where you see David Byrne mouthing or not mouthing some of the things that are coming out from what you're hearing. So Debbie must have used another take, filmed another performance, but they used another audio performance and and instead, because that was the better performance. So
they might have been filming from the side one night and got a really good audio performance, but then wanted a video from close-ups from another night. In that aspect,
they really captured the best of the best.
Yeah.
So, and to make it the best thing it could possibly be, and it's just great. Yep.
Yeah. Now, I mean, let's talk about this a little bit. If not to get too in the weeds, but if Chris Frantz and Tina Weymouth really, they really go in hard on him, on David Byrne. I mean, if this were the case, do you think David Byrne would have let them perform as Tom Tom Club in the middle of the show to walk off stage? I know he had to get changed into his big suit, but still, that could have been done in another way. It could have been done with a Talking Head song and extending it, but instead we get this great kind of cameo by a band within a band, and we get the Tom Tom Club to show up, which was just totally fun. It's just like it was a totally, like, the vibe changed, in another good way. It was a different vibe because what the Tom Tom Club does is, they're kind of taking elements of hip hop and really kind of leaning into that and more of the quirkiness. And Chris, what did you like? What was your thoughts of like all of a sudden this band within a band showing up?
I think it was cool that they got the opportunity to do that. And I don't know, maybe that was the compromise with Byrne, like making himself the focal point with the suit, that they got to do a Tom Tom Club cut. But the other thing too is, like, that record, if I'm not mistaken, was huge, right? When it came out, that first Tom Tom Club album. So it's almost like, how do you ignore it?
It wasn't gigantic. At the time, Tom Tom Club, a lot of people didn't know that it was an offshoot of Talking Heads. The song became more popular afterwards when it started getting sampled, like Genius of Love. It was out.
There you go.
But it was too quirky, right, Eric? It was at the time, it was very quirky, even for Talking Heads fans.
Well, let's put it this way. Watching it with my wife and my kid, I mean, that might have been the only song that my wife recognized. That did it. She knew that song, but not very much of the Talking Head stuff. Like, she was, of course, the popular songs, but some of the deeper cuts on there, like, she's like laughing because, but that was the only song that she actually would sing out loud to. She knew it. She knew that song. So it did have an audience. It did have that,
James Brown,
that little, group there.
To me, if I had to pick, like, and then when I took some notes when I was rewatching I watched the movie twice and I rewatched it again today. And when I was taking, like, my last little bit of notes for myself to things I was going to say, to me, the one note I put was that's the only track on the record that to me sounds dated. And, like, I feel like Chris Frantz is, like, beatboxing and hip hop, that to me it sounds like super hokey.
He was being an MC.
They're having fun, but it's just like, I don't know. To me, it's like almost like the dead spot in the record.
Well, that's kind of what the Tom Tom Club was, though, is kind of taking those hip hop elements and again, at the time, hip hop was still relatively new in '84, so this was kind of like a new thing, kind of taking that stuff and working with it. So for me, I found it refreshing. I totally forgot that happened, or I probably didn't even realize it when we saw the film that that's what was happening. So to see it, I was like, oh wow, this was just really great how they just kind of got the stage for a song and kind of kept the vibe going. It didn't stop the show, right? It wasn't like this thing from left field that grinded everything to a halt. It actually kind of a nice, it was kind of like a nice palate cleanser, because then when David Byrne came out, they just kind of kept going. They did, Girlfriend is Better, and it flowed for me. But I think it was a nice diversion and a nice for me, kind of a sentimental thing. Yeah, it may be a little dated, and that song or that type of experimentation they were doing was new then, but now it's been sampled, so it kind of be a little long in the tooth, I guess. Right? Is that a fair? That's a fair statement. So yeah, the big suit comes out, which is an iconic Talking Heads visual of David Byrne in the oversized suit. What got weird is I think after the second song, he took the jacket off, which looks like it looked very like seeing a guy in an oversized suit is one thing because it makes his head look small. But then when he took the jacket off, the pants were like, it was like grandpa. They were really wide, and it made the whole thing look strange. I'm like, now it looks strange. Mm-hmm. With the jacket on, it looked okay. With the jacket off, it looks weird because he's got this shirt on, and you see how big the pants are, like they're like got padding in them and everything. So it was kind of weird. What are some of the highlights for Chris? Let's start with you. What kind of there's a lot to chew on here. This could be hard. You know, for me, it was like Heaven, because it was such a simple arrangement of the song. It was before everything got going. You know, the popular stuff is easy, but also this must be the place, the part of the show with the lamp when he's singing and they just has the lamp on stage. Again, it's artistic and it's cinematic and visual, but what for you was?
I mean, to me, the thing that always sticks with me is I kind of like that open, and I guess part of it is also the visual of the stage coming together. But just as far as like a concert and a set list, that sequence from the opening cut of Psycho Killer all the way through up to Life During Wartime, that sequence of tracks, it's just a banger after a banger after a banger, and it's just like, to me, that was just like the most intense part of the concert. So that's always kind of been the part that always sticks with me, is just like all of those songs and the way they're played. Like What a Day That Was amazing. Burning Down the House has always been like, going back to when I was a kid, that was always like my favorite Talking Head song. Life During Wartime is always like a classic, but then, you know, What a Day That Was is great, and Heaven always stuck out for me too, because it's so sparse but so beautiful. And what I really paid attention to more than anything else, and I think it's because when we were talking about doing this, Eric made a comment about Tina Weymouth being an underrated bass player. So it's the first time I really paid attention to her playing bass. And even though you hear her story, how she had never played bass before, and she's playing in what was once perceived to be this like punk band, she's really a very gifted bassist. And I don't think she gets enough credit as a bassist. I don't know if it's because she's getting overshadowed by the other guys in the band, but she really does lay a great foundation. And I think in Heaven, it's really on display. Like, that song isn't as beautiful or what it is without her playing on it. And so to me, that sequence of tracks has always kind of been the part that stuck with me the most for that record.
Yeah, you're absolutely, Eric. Before I kick it over to you, I mean, you know, when we did, Eric and I, one of our first episodes, one of our first top fives was top 5 bass players, and she was grievously omitted from that list. Yeah. And, you know, and I think the stuff with Tom Tom Club and Talking Heads shows that she's a funk bass player too. I mean, you can't play that type of music that Tom Tom Club is doing without having some chops and having some funk background. And you also see that in Talking Heads with the stuff that she does, right, Eric? I mean, she's kind of, I don't know why she doesn't get the credit. I don't know. Do you have any?
What's the one word for me that best describes this entire show or album or movie? Is rhythm. Rhythm is the driving. It's a masterclass of rhythm. So keeping that rhythm, when you hear those heavy bass lines, you realize that it's her. You know, it could, you know, you might, maybe the guy on the keyboards maybe doing something funky there, but, you know, could be, maybe, but I don't think so. Yeah. I think she is definitely laying it down. I think she's keeping it there. Her and Chris together, I think they're solid, just a solid, you know, spine of this whole thing. And that to me can only be better, you know, enhanced with percussion and with this, but it would that stuff wouldn't be there without that line, that
you have to have a foundation.
That foundation, that backbone. Yeah.
And Chris, maybe it's because they came up in the new wave kind of punk era where musicianship wasn't really the focus of it. Although these guys are all like great, they're I mean, they really are, like Eric said, they're a tight band. But back then, in the late 70s, there was that aesthetic of punk and just kind of driving, and so she might have kind of got lost in the wash. Oh, look how cute! It's a female bass player in this punky new wave band. You know, that's all I can.
And it's interesting too, because if you look at some of the CBGB's bands, they're very talented musicians. Like the first Television record, Marquee Moon, Tom Verlaine is a great guitar player, or Blondie, the things that Chris Stein and Clem Burke do in Blondie as a guitarist and a drummer, respectively. They're all great musicians that don't get the credit for being musicians. And I'm sure that's got to be part of it, is that they're coming from, the Bowery where, we're punk and we're going to, scale it down and bring it back to what makes rock and roll great. But these guys were experimenting. They were using that artistic freedom that punk gave, but they were also using their skills and their abilities as songwriters and musicians. And that part sometimes does get lost in the sauce with that era of musicians from that place in that time. I think that's a really valid point.
Yeah, and especially as they went on and expanded their sound and got more ambitious, they, everybody in the band. No, I don't think anybody in Talking Heads got left behind.
No, not at all.
And Jerry Harrison, I mean, he came from the Modern Lovers, so he was in a well-established band,
and he actually too.
And he actually said, you know what, I'm going to join. I'm interested. They approached him and said, hey, are you, Chris Frantz and David Byrne, like, hey, you interested in joining our band? He's like, yeah, but not until you get a record contract. Like, I'm not, you guys got to prove yourselves first, because he was a known entity. He was a professional musician. He was a recording artist with Modern Lovers. And they're like, well, we're making this new band. And he's like, sure, but, get a record contract and come see me. So they cut their first single and he's not on it. And then once they got the contract, he joined, so these guys, as loosey goosey or as rootsy or as punk as these people are, they were, they either were accomplished musicians or, like Tina, became accomplished musicians. Yeah. And I think for her, she probably deserves the most credit because she wasn't a bass player. So for her to embrace that and not just be passable, but to really blossom into this bassist extraordinaire is even more of a compelling story, I think. As far as you expect David Byrne to be a genius, like it's kind of like, look how quirky he is and look at all that stuff. But for Tina, I think her story is much more compelling because, she became this rock solid bassist and funky and really rose to the occasion where the expectations may not have been as high as just kind of, we need a bass player. And,
and I wonder, people like David Byrne working so closely with people like Brian Eno and just, the sort of, but perhaps the art rock aspect of that, pushing them maybe to want to do more, to take it a little bit more seriously and just, rather than just say, hey, I'm in a punk band, and just embracing the artistry of it. Had to have been a factor. I feel, I mean, they might want to blame David Byrne for pushing things a little too heavy, but I think I would think that he probably knew enough to say, hey, look, we need to do a little bit more here. Cause he became, more or less an arranger, producer, and that's exactly how people like Peter Gabriel work as well, surrounding himself with great musicians. If you're not, because he himself, or they don't play all of these instruments themselves, so they need that. But they have it in their head. They know what they want. So you need established players. You need somebody to really fulfill that vision. But in this case, I think they're having fun doing it, though. I mean, So. I don't know. Go ahead, Chris.
In some respects, you gotta wonder too. Like, David Byrne is a solid guitar player, but he might, as you said, he might not be able to get everything out of his head that he wants to onto the fretboard. Right. Because look at the guitar players he played with. He played with, was it Alex Ware? I always forget the guy's first name. Guitar player, Alex Ware. And then before that, on the tour before that, and the live record that they put out before this live record, the name of this band is Talking Heads. On the second record on that, he's got Adrian Belew playing.
Adrian Belew,
and Adrian Belew is like, he played with Robert Fripp and Frank Zappa and all these like stellar musicians. So I think there is something to be said for that. And I don't necessarily think they saw themselves as a punk band as much as they said, well, here's this scene where it's cool to do whatever the hell we want to do. So we're going to exploit that, even if we're not about that whole idea of being punk and all that stuff. It's just, this is a scene that will accept us for being the artists that we are.
Which made them punk by,
right.
by saying, let's exploit the scene and do something different. That automatically made them a punk band by default, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, they were part of that whole CBGB scene and, part of that New York, quote unquote, New York punk sound. And on this film, it's so refined. Like it's kind of when, they do stuff from throughout their catalog and the way it's presented, like I said, the music has to be that good if it can be adapted to these different this world music and these different types of styles that, give it fresh life. That means the music itself has to be solid, and I think, like I said, kind of presenting it with an expanded band and expanded musicians, and it's able to sound different and fresh. Just kind of gives us a whole interesting look at reapproaching. If you're a fan of Talking Heads, this must have been really interesting to reapproach it and hear this in a little bit of a different way, Chris.
It's interesting. Before we got on tonight, I was on the phone with my younger brother, and I said to him, I'm doing Stop Making Sense tonight. I said, is there anything that you would have me say, or is there anything that you think I should make a comment about, or I should speak on? And the thing he said to me is, he goes, it's one of the few bands where you can say that their live album is kind of like the cornerstone album of like giving you an overview of their career and what they're about, and like what people will go back to if they just want to get like flavors of who they are. Like, instead of like the greatest hits, you're going to this live album. Like, this is more so what people will listen to rather than go finding the Talking Heads greatest hits.
Yeah, I would agree. And it doesn't suffer from the crowd noise and, it plays almost like a live in the studio recording.
Yeah.
Rather than having a concert feel, just because it was recorded so well, it doesn't have that concert arena or concert hall feel to it. Mm-hmm. It has a live performance feel to it, but not in a live venue, if that makes sense.
It does.
It does. It absolutely does.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Which is different. It's different than listening to Kiss Alive, right?
Yeah, it's covered in
something like this, right? Or Frampton Comes Alive, or anything else. Like back then, the gimmick was putting having the crowd noise in, so you knew they were having a good time, and it validated the band. These guys didn't need that. It's kind of like, here we're gonna perform and record it. And
I think both approaches have their merit, but I think this would have suffered if they did that. But like for Kiss Alive, I think that's Kiss Alive is one of my favorite albums. That almost makes that record. It's one of the things that enhances the record, but it definitely would take away from this record.
Is that because they tell you when to clap, Chris? Is that
I don't know. I was like an obsessed Kiss fan when I was 16. I can't explain it. I don't know why, but yeah, I was very much into Kiss.
That was my little dig. This is as good a time as any to let's unfurl the 3 Lies and a Truth. And since Chris read the Chris Frantz book, you have to go last. I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry.
Okay.
You're probably going to get a lot of this because, you probably.
I've been off the last few times, so I don't know.
All right. Well, we're going to see. But at home, if it's your first time listening, I'm going to read 4 statements. 3 of them are false. Only one of them is true. So it'll be up to you at home also to listen and let us know on social media. Hit us up on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, and let us know how you did. Did I stump you, or was this like, shooting ducks in a barrel? Easy peasy. I think this is going to be easy for Chris. So that's why we need our first sacrificial lamb, Mr. Eric Kuber. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the 4 statements, and then I'll kick it over to Eric, and he'll tell me what he thinks is the truth. So 3 of these are false statements. 1 is true. Here we go. Number 1. The title of the film, Stop Making Sense, comes from a line in the song Slippery People. Number 2, David Byrne briefly dated Terry Nunn from the group Berlin in the 80s. Number 3, Chris Frantz and David Byrne asked Chrissie Hynde of the Pretenders to join them as their lead singer when the band was still in its formative stage. Final quote, or final factoid. Lou Reed, the great Lou Reed, offered to give Talking Heads a record contract and produce their first album. After they consulted with a lawyer, the lawyer suggested they run away as fast as they can from the offer he made. Again, the title of the title of the film comes from a line in the song Slippery People. Number 2, David Byrne briefly dated Terry Nunn from the group Berlin in the 80s. Number 3, Chris Frantz and David Byrne asked Chrissie Hynde of the Pretenders to join them as their lead singer when the band was still in its formative stages. And then finally, Lou Reed offered to give Talking Heads a record contract and produce their first album. After they consulted with a lawyer, the lawyer suggested they run away as fast as they can from that offer. 3 of those are lies. 1 of those is true. Give me all you got.
I think I remember briefly seeing something about Chrissie Hynde. I think I might go with C.
Okay.
As the
Chris
truth.
Frantz and David
Yeah.
Byrne asked Chrissie Hynde of the Pretenders to join them as their lead singer when the band was still in its formative stage. You're going with C.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. I need a locked in, like a locked in sound effect, like your answer is locked in. I got to get that.
Yeah.
I'm going to work on it. Yeah.
Little,
Or whatever, something dramatic.
yeah.
Chris, do you need me to read those, or you
I think I got it. The one I was thinking it was the Lou Reed one. That's my guess.
So your guess is Lou Reed offered to give Talking Heads a record contract and produce their first album. After consulting with a lawyer, he suggested they run away as fast as they can from that offer.
Yes.
That's what you're saying. That is true.
That's the one I'm saying
Okay.
is true.
Alrighty, everybody at home, hopefully you have your answers locked in as well. The first lie. The title of the film comes from a line in the song Slippery People. No, it comes from a line in the song Girlfriend is Better.
Yep.
So I knew, second lie. David Byrne briefly dated Terry Nunn from the group Berlin in the 80s. He actually dated Tony Basil. Or Basil.
Okay.
Oh, Mickey, you're so fine. He dated her in the 80s.
Wow.
She directed Once in a Lifetime, the video.
Right. I remember that.
They dated briefly. So we've got 2 left. Chris Frantz and David Byrne asked Chrissie Hynde of the Pretenders to join them as their lead singer. And then Lou Reed offered to give the Talking Heads a record contract. You guys want the truth or the lie? Want me to tell you lies? Tell you I love you and tell you lies?
Give us the third lie.
You want the third lie? The third lie is Chris Frantz and David Byrne asked Chrissie Hynde of the Pretenders to join them. They actually asked Debbie Harry.
Oh, okay.
And Debbie Harry said, guys, I'm already in a band and I'm going to go back to them right now. But thank you for buying me a drink. So they actually
that makes
did
sense
ask
because they
Debbie
both played CBG,
Right. And I think Chrissie Hynde was living in England at the time that they were coming up. So that's why.
they all came up together. That makes sense. Yep.
So Lou Reed did offer to give the Talking Heads a record contract and produce their album, but with the stipulation that he would get all the royalties.
Oh my
God.
God.
When the Talking Heads are like, well, we need to consult a lawyer. And so they brought the contract to the lawyer, and the lawyer's like, get the hell away from this as fast as possible. This is not good. Like, this guy's taking everything.
Wow.
Lou Reed, scumbag. What thought?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard any pleasant things about Lou Reed, like as a person ever. So
that's just wrong, though. It's like that's predatory behavior.
It really is. That's awful.
I'll produce your record, but you got to, you're going to give me all the royalties. It's like, okay.
Oh,
what is this? Creedence Clearwater Revival again?
Yeah, seriously.
Wow.
So that was 3 lies and a truth. That played at home. Let us know how you did. The truth was the Lou Reed statement was the true statement. Everything else was fake, but some of it was based in truth. I sometimes make stuff up totally, but sometimes I take facts and tweak them. So there's a little hint of reality in there. So thank you both for playing. Chris, I told you were going to get it. No worries, man. No worries.
I definitely, yeah. I'm still thinking about the eggs from Bob Dylan, man.
From Bethel, New York.
It still sounds legitimate, man. I'm telling you.
You know what? Send Dylan a note.
Yeah.
Say, you know what? I got this great idea, Bob.
Yeah.
In addition to whiskey, eggs. Free range eggs from Bethel.
Bethel, New
I don't even
York.
know if there's got to be farms in Bethel, but anyway.
Oh, I can assure you there are.
Well, Woodstock is up there, so there's got to be
Oh, yeah. My wife has a cousin that lives in wherever it is. I can't think of the name of the town, but it's where Todd Rundgren is from.
Okay.
Hmm.
There we go. All these iconic artists. Todd Rundgren. Yeah, so as we kind of wind this down, I'm going to recommend, I think it's worth a rental. Well, it's as of the publishing of this episode, it's streaming on Max or HBO Max or whatever it's called this month. Probably available for rent on Amazon Prime, I would guess. If you're at all intrigued, I'd prefer that you watch the film. What do you think?
I agree.
Yeah, it's definitely an experience to see the movie, 100%.
Yeah,
This is one of those
$3 or $4 on it to rent it if it's on Prime.
This is one of those. I think I have firmly put this in a top 10. I'm always moving
Top 10 what, concert films? Or
top 10
top 10
film
or what? Top 10 films? Okay.
ever.
Wow.
Really?
I highly recommend that everyone needs to see this movie at least once in their life. If you love music, if you love movies, the way it's shot, the way it's done, musically, it's entertaining. It's the whole package. It's definitely worth seeing at least once, even if you're not a Talking Heads fan. So
just so I'm clear, you're putting this above the Bad News Bears in Breaking Training. I just want to be clear.
So. I think
but not go to Japan.
I think so.
But not go to Japan. It's not better than Bad News Bears go to Japan.
Let's put it this way. I definitely think it's one of the best movies of the 80s, for sure. One of the best 80s experiences.
Yeah.
So.
It absolutely is. Everything Eric said is spot on. It's a piece of film. It's a piece of art. And it's a concert. And it is different than watching other concert films. Because the lack of an audience, I think it almost kind of makes it a more personal. It's almost like you're watching a performance just for you because you don't have they show the audience maybe twice. Like you don't have that reminding you that you're at a show. And it's almost like you're watching a filmed Broadway play or something because you don't hear the audience. Because like when you go to a Broadway show, people aren't cheering and yelling the whole time. You're watching what the events unfolding on stage. And that's what I think this is more akin to, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, to me, speaks to how powerful and important this film is, to Eric's point. When I think of Jonathan Demme, I don't think of Silence of the Lambs. When I hear Jonathan Demme's name, this is what I think of. I think of Stop Making Sense. And I don't know if that's because of my lack of knowledge of his film works or just like where my head is at as far as my interest in music versus film. But to me, I almost feel like this is his career defining movie more than anything else that he's ever done. And he made a lot of movies before he passed away.
No, yeah. I totally, his early work was very musical. I mean, he definitely has a lot of great taste. I mean, we talked about the movie Something Wild, Dean, with Jeff Daniels, Melanie Griffith, an early performance with Ray Liotta. But the music, the soundtrack to that film, if you ever guys get a chance to see that movie, check out the music in particular. It's very, it's not your typical needle drop stuff. I mean, it's very sort of like very much like this. It's very world music. He's using all those exotic types of bands, and at this time. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely. It's a masterpiece. It really is.
I think this is what you kind of, as you were saying that, Eric, you made me think of Scorsese.
Yeah.
Scorsese is very attached to music in his films also, right? It's a very important part. And The Last Waltz was a very personal project to him as well. It was something very kind of close to his heart where he was at the time. He was living with Robbie Robertson and I think there's something to be said for that, right? Because Scorsese didn't just approach it as a concert film as well, right? They did the whole dinner, and it was this whole thing. Like it was more like his was much more like the undertaking of a motion picture. I think maybe Jonathan Demme might have actually learned probably from the problems that Scorsese had.
No, I think
to approach this.
That might have been an influence. Because Scorsese in filming the show itself went at it like he was filming a movie. the camera needs to be here, there, that kind of thing. And to have that kind of thought process, Demi, I think it definitely must have picked up on a few of those. It wasn't as complicated. But also with Last Waltz, it's also a documentary. Of sorts. So you got kind of both there. One of the interesting aspects too, I wanted to point out when you mentioned that it's like a performance for yourself, picture it like even the wide shots, you see people, against like the lighting, you see these black figures. It's almost like you're in a movie theater in itself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you see people in the row, like couple rows, you don't feel like you're at a concert necessarily. You feel like you're in a movie theater, if that makes sense. Like, because it's black and it's like, you see people like, and again, not seeing the people like, being whatever in the audience, like swaying and all that kind of stuff, definitely made it that more theatrical, much more of a cinematic approach. And I really, that's what I think I really dig about this film. It's just the fact that you get such a great piece of music, great art, but also a great film out of it. I just think it's great. It's just so good.
Yeah, it's not the boilerplate concert film.
No,
let's get the majestic angles, let's get the sweeping view of the arena and people partying, dancing and drinking and mouthing the words.
Before we started, I was watching a clip with Bill Burr. Those little things where people talk about movies and such, and he's like, that one of the things I fucking regret was not seeing Stop Making Sense back in the day, because I kept thinking about that song, that high, and it's like he's talking about Swamp, and he's like, I didn't know the name of that song. I don't know, I didn't know the Talking Heads, but when I watched that, I wanted to see the entire movie.
Yeah,
just watching that one clip on YouTube made him want to go back and watch the entire thing. He's like, I so regret not seeing that back in the 80s. I could kick myself in the ass for not doing that. I'm such an asshole.
Did you see when Colbert interviewed them, what he had said?
Yes. Yeah.
That he could have actually seen this concert and stayed home to do homework or something. Like a Cooper do. And so he couldn't go.
Had we known, I mean, like I said, Eric and I, we saw it as a fluke in the theater when it came out. So it's kind of like, we just was like, and then walked out and was like, wow, Talking
Instant
Heads.
fans.
Like, okay, that's kind of
instant
it was something for us. It was something different and outside of our zone. So as we wind it down, we're going to encourage you, if the Talking Heads, if you know a couple of songs, this is going to be enjoyable. It's not, like we said, all the songs are up tempo. There's always something going on dynamically that, like, there's so much eye candy to watch the performers play, to see David Byrne quirky and his, when he's not convulsing around, he's actually running around and playing his guitar, and it's not all weirdness. There's a rock band in there, but then there's all these great other musicians too that bring different styles of music. So, like I said, it's available now for on Max, probably available on Prime for streaming. Absolutely check it out. If not, if nothing else, check it out on Spotify. It's streaming. It sounds gorgeous. Start there. If that intrigues you, drop the money and rent it. If you don't have the streaming service that it's on, it's absolutely a must check out. And I'm glad I revisited it, because I was like, oh wow, I appreciated it so much more.
A24 did an amazing job.
They did.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they had some trouble finding like the original audio too. It got bounced around. I think they couldn't find the original print, and it turns out MGM had the original print, but MGM had nothing to do with the distribution of the film. So they don't know why MGM didn't have why MGM had the print. And then the digital audio, the audio stuff was lost because Todd AO had done it, but then they went belly up. So nobody knew where all the Todd AO archives were. It turns out that Sony had picked up the Todd AO archives.
Yeah.
So they had the audio part of it. So for A24 really did like beyond due diligence to put this project together, to find the original video master videos and the original audio mastering that they can digital audio that they can put all this together. And
the studio package is exciting, and I'm looking forward to maybe talking about some of their films on the podcast. They're just rocking it, man. I mean, I'm loving their stuff, but I'm glad that this movie found a home. And it makes sense. Perfect. It makes absolute sense for this, for A24 to have it and to
I see what you did there.
Yeah. So
It makes perfect sense.
I would have thought somebody like Criterion would have picked it up.
Yeah.
And redid it. I was waiting for years. I'm a Criterion fan, and I've been collecting, and I've been waiting, because they did Last Waltz just a couple of years ago. They did, they finally got that. And oh man, they got to stop making sense. But in that A24, I'm like, okay.
Even better.
Yeah, even better. Yeah, no doubt.
Awesome. So. Well, it's available out there. It's streaming. Buy it. Eric is the last bastion of physical media.
Media, there it is, right there, folks.
If there's going to be one copy of something left on Earth, Eric will probably have it. So you'll be able to go find. He's going to make a fortune in rentals when all the streaming goes belly up. He's going to open his own store. He's going to bring it all back. That's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast. Go ahead, like I said in the beginning, hit us up, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Check us out. We've got a great, thriving, vibrant community on all those platforms. You can find me. You can find Eric. You can find Christopher Clark there. We're always posting. And like I said, we've got a fantastic back catalog of great stuff as well. We encourage you to check that out. So Christopher Clark, In the Dark.
I know. I'm like, I got to find a better place to do my podcast from. I end up
like the ambiance at the end. I love it.
If you're watching us on YouTube, Christopher Clark is auditioning for the next A24 horror film.
Yeah. I'm going to see the sequel to Midsommar.
The Face, rated R.
There you go.
But thank you, Chris, for joining us as always.
I had a lot of fun, man.
Yeah. It was. Thank you for putting this on the list and kind of giving me the kick in the rear end to kind of revisit it, because it had been circling and then it fell by the wayside. So I certainly appreciate it as well. So, of course, you will find Eric and I each and every week. Eric will be on his comfy couch. I will be in my rock hard green IKEA chair while we wait to bring you our next foray into the world of music and movies. So for Chris, for Eric, this has been Dean, asking you to please be kind and rewind.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.